Last week we talked about why Sumps might not be the best filter for you. But if you really value customization and being able to filter a lot, Sumps are the king. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today we're diving into what makes Sumps amazing. There are a lot of fantastic videos out there from a number of different fish fan creators that talk about Sumps. So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty about how you can customize a sump or even optimize a sump, I'm going to have a couple links in the description down below. But let's talk about what makes this, an entire fish tank worth of volume, the most customizable and powerful potential filtration system there is. Look at it. Look how much room you have. There's so much room for activities. Here's the thing, right? If you are really looking to do some crazy nonsense with your filtration, it's kind of hard to beat the room that one of these things has. So that's number one. Room. You can do kind of whatever you want, and there's a lot of different ways you can get a sump built. You don't necessarily have to go with something like this, a custom acrylic job like I have. You can go into DIY solutions. You can go into a number of different variations. Basically, you can get a sump built or build it yourself with whatever design you have in mind. So if you have, say, a Petco dollar per gallon sale, and you're trying to filter a 125 gallon tank or something like that, you can go pick up a 20 long. Get a few extra glass panels at a local hardware store or cut your own out of a bigger sheet. You can DIY the baffles in with a little bit of silicone. And if you're very handy, you can get yourself a really, really efficient filter for significantly less than a canister filter would cost you. And it's way more effective than a canister filter can ever be. Plus, because of all the room that a sump can offer you, you can hide all your equipment in it. You can keep 2 different sets of fish in these places. Now, of course, the saltwater folks are like, you newbie aquarists in the freshwater trade, we've been using sumps forever. I get it. They have a lot of big, bulky equipment that we don't necessarily need in freshwater, and this bad boy is the best way to hide all that stuff and make it at its maximum efficiency. But in freshwater, do we really need something this crazy? Well, let me give you the second reason why these are amazing. Let us say that you are doing an entire rack of fish tanks. And rather than something like mine, where there's just a couple 40 breeders on a rack, maybe you have 20 tanks on a rack. Lots of 10-gallon tanks. And instead of having a bunch of individual filters or 800 little sponges, you could route all of them to a central system on one sump. And now, you've massively increased the water volume for all of your tanks plus your filtration system in one go. And because you have this massive system, all your parameters are significantly more stable. You can house a massive amount of beneficial bacteria in this thing and make sure that all of your tanks are well filtered. But it's not just filtration capacity that makes sumps amazing. The second thing? Maintenance. Whether you're using something like a filter sock, like is present in my sump here, or you're doing a more DIY method like my friend Joel Corvus Oscen will do, where he'll use batting and literally cover every place that the water transitions with a piece of filter batting. So he collects tons of particulates, keeps it off of his other media, and makes sure that he gets amazing water polishing. So you get that super crystal clear, beautiful water that you want. Oh, and you have all this room to hide your pumps and things after all the filtration and particle mechanical portions are done to make sure that you basically never have to maintain your equipment. It stays pristine and amazingly clear. And you can do the same thing with filter socks, right? These things are extremely small. You're talking typically somewhere between 5 and 50 micron, depending on the particular type of filter sock you're using. That's going to clean out so much of your particulates that you basically don't have to worry about them. And the maintenance becomes extremely easy because with a filter sock, you just pull out the socks, put fresh ones in, keep spares, it makes it way easier. And then you just go and wash these things out, let them air dry for about a week, and repeat the process. Once a week, bam. You're literally just putting new ones in. Maybe it takes you 10 minutes or so to really thoroughly clean these out. And then you set them to dry and wait till next week. And if you're doing the filter batting system, like my friend Joel does, you just have new pieces that you slide in and you take the old ones out and you're done. You just lay them in there. All you have to do is cut them, lay them in, after you pull the old ones out, throw the old ones out, you're done. Like that, it's easy. Now granted, you might say, oh, but Bentley, you're going to need an auto top-off because of evaporation. You've got this big opening and all this water movement. If you're doing your weekly water changes, the top-off covers itself. You don't really have to worry about it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Last week, Bentley, you talked about a potential of what happens if your power goes out and da-da-da, and you could flood the thing. If you set your system up correctly, which takes maybe a half hour of research online, you'll never have that problem. You can put in very simple fail-safes and position things correctly to where the maximum water level that's ever going to enter your sump from your tank will never overflow. Unlike some potential risks of certain power filters where when they get certain leaks, they can spill out tons of water because the input is so low in the tank. Because most of our sumps are using an overflow box or some kind of drilled port in the tank, it is much easier to control the maximum risk of water leaving your aquarium and going into the sump. And if you then set everything up correctly, it's never going to flood. You never have to worry about that, even with a power outage. It's the king of customization. If you really want something that is truly a custom solution, whether it's crazily filtering one particular tank, and you can do something like a 40-gallon breeder with a 20-gallon sump, and it's amazing, right? Because you add a bunch of water volume. Typically, the active water volume is about half, so think about 10 gallons. So now your 40-gallon system has become a 50-gallon system. And let's say that you want to use one of those empty chambers as a refugium for extra plants. Or maybe plants that don't like the super bright light, and you want to keep some much lower light things down below, like certain species of Anubias or Boost or something like that you want to keep anyway because you want to keep those plants, but they're not really ready for the high light in your upper tank. You can split them and make it easy. Or let's say you have an example like me. I keep rainbow fish, which means that in any tank where I have rainbow fish, I can't keep shrimp. Because guess what? Rainbow fish see shrimp and go, snack. But if I had a display tank of rainbow fish filtered by a sump, I can use that refugium-style chamber and keep shrimp in my sump. Now the shrimp have a habitat, and it's okay to put a little food in there, especially if you do the filter system like Corvus Oscen does, where you have an extra particulate filter. It acts kind of like a miniature Matten filter in a way. Now you're getting highly oxygenated water because of the amount of movement the water has to do through the sump. You get really good flow or customized flow with a DC controllable pump. You have massive water volumes, and now you can kind of keep things that should not live together because of aggression issues or maybe some other problem that you're worried about in one system. Your filter can sort of be a backup fish tank for some of the stuff that you might not normally be able to keep in your display aquarium. Have I convinced you yet? If not, I've got one more for you. Here's the biggest thing about sumps. I mentioned that you can filter a lot of systems, and for a great example of this, there's a link down below. I'm going to set you to a particular tour of Greg Jones's fish room and how he uses DIY sumps. And instead of making them from tanks or getting crazy expensive acrylic ones like I have, where I kind of want this to be pretty and on display for the tank I have in mind of this thing, he uses totes and tubs. If you think about those Rubbermaid tubs that you can get relatively inexpensive that people use for like outdoor ponds and stuff like that, he can make a $100 tub filter a massive number of tanks. And because he has this huge water volume and space, he can create a massive system that filters way more tanks significantly cheaper, because now you're only running a single DC controllable pump, and you just have to sit there and set up the plumbing so that everything drains to the sump, and when the sump is pushing water back in, it equally divides it, just like if you were to do a central air system. Now you're doing it for a filtration system that's moving a ton of water in, and now you have this massive increase in water volume to make a more stable system, to prevent the risk of disease. And you might say, well, if you're in a singular system and disease does occur, you use this in the things that you know are really rock solid. You still quarantine your fish, keep everything separate that needs to be separate, and you have to make sure that those tanks that are on the same system can all handle the same rough parameters. So if you're trying to do, say, cold water fish and tropical fish, you can't do them all in the same sump. But you could have one sump for cold water fish, one sump for tropical fish, and then you can heat inside the sump itself and just use a few heaters because of the amount of water you're moving collectively, and save yourself a ton on your power bill while adding a ton of benefit. They're the king of customization, plain and simple. If you're DIY capable, Sumps might be the best possible filtration system for you. Especially if you're like me and you tend to go toward larger tanks, you can save a ton of money by setting up sumps, especially like central sumps filtering multiple tanks. I could, in this room, okay? We got a 40-gallon breeder here, 40-gallon breeder over there, 2 over there, and there's going to be 2 here. So that's 6 40-gallon breeders, plus the guppy mansion, which is 140 gallons, right? In theory, if this wasn't like the room designed as it is in a house, but if I did this in my garage and I set it up correctly, I could run all of these tanks, because they like very similar water parameters, on a singular sump. Think about that for a second. 6 40-gallon tanks. There's 240 gallons. Plus 140 more gallons, so now we're at 380 gallons. It's going to be 400 gallons of water in one system. As long as we know that all our parameters are safe and relatively okay, and we don't have to worry about any risk of disease, now I've turned each 40-gallon tank into a 400-gallon water system when it comes to stability. When it comes to maintaining my equipment and maintenance, instead of having to maintenance, oh, I got a canister filter here, and I got hang-on backs here, and a canister there, and a hang-on back over there, and some sponges there, or whatever the heck it may be, I have one single filter that I can do a lot of my maintenance relatively quickly if I'm on top of it. Now, if you're filtering that many tanks at once, and you're using a filter sock, you might have to clean these out a little bit more often. But with how easy these are to clean, and if you're buying extras, it's super fast. It's faster than ever cleaning out a sponge filter, ever cleaning out even the best and fastest hang-on-the-backs, and it's certainly faster than cleaning in your canister filters. And you get all those benefits of increased water volume, being able to hide all of your equipment. If you've plumbed it really cleanly, you can set things in place, such as backup power. Do you have a pump that runs on minimal power? You could use something like a backup power supply for a computer to power that pump for a surprising amount of time in the event of a power outage. Maintaining filtration and oxygenation on your tanks. Yeah, if you really want to go crazy, this is the king. Now I know what you're thinking. You like me. You're not very DIY handy, and maybe, just maybe, you can't ponder shelling out the kind of money for a custom-built thing. This is the last thing that I will say about sumps that I think is actually a huge benefit. I have seen tons of used sumps, whether they're at my local aquarium club auctions or on things like Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, etc., for dirt cheap. I have one of the glass Aquarium ones that you can buy, and I'll put a little picture up here. Those things at retail are like $300, $250, depends on the size. I got that at a club auction for $50. For the cost of an AquaClear, I got an entire sump. The only thing I have to do is add a pump. It comes with the tubes. I mean, you can find these things, just like you can find used filters. You can find sumps at amazing deals. Incredible deals. And that's one of the other massive benefits to a sump, is because they take up a lot of room and sometimes people need to move or things like that, these are hard to sell for a lot of people, which means that you can get an extremely good deal on one more often than you might think. I'm telling you, capability, customization, power, water volume, and if you're DIY friendly, these actually come in at an extraordinarily cheap cost. in comparison to trying to do something like a large canister filter. Sumps, they really are pretty amazing. Saltwater has been doing this thing right for a long time, and I think it's time for a lot of us freshwater folks to consider stepping up. That's what I got for you today. What do you think? Did you learn something about sumps? Are you considering a sump in the near future? Maybe you're already using a sump. Maybe you're one of those lords and ladies of the sump, and you have known the power and potential of a sump all along. And for that, I congratulate you, because they are pretty freaking awesome. Especially when you start doing large tanks, or you want to do some crazy stuff like my friend Greg does. Let me know in the comments down below. Interested in a sump? Maybe you're thinking, I don't know, Bentley, it seems too crazy. I'm going to stay with a sponge, or this, or that. Or maybe you're like, when are you going to do this filter next, man? I'm tired of waiting. Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Consider sharing it. Maybe you've got a friend who's considering a sump, or maybe you have a uneducated heathen you need to teach about why your sump is so amazing. Maybe this will help them figure it out. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.